Okay guys, Simon Trizzelli here, the voice of reason. And so because they took the video down the other day, I'll just have to tell you a story instead, won't I? Because you like my stories. So this is for entertainment purposes only. And it's a fictional story about a fictional world, but it seems very, very like this one. So 445,000 years ago, a spacefaring race in this story called the Anak came to Earth, and they came to Earth in a very interesting way. And I've written a book on this story, so at some point I'll tell you more about the way the book is. But in reality, all I want to do right now is to express a thing about what the Anak did to humankind. So they created humankind in their image, utilizing a hominoid race that was currently on that planet. And they introduced 5% of their life essence, which we would possibly call DNA and the genome sequence. But they left out certain things, and they capped the telomeres in this story so that those hominoids, even though they would know and be able to worship gods, they would not be able to be like them, just in their image. Okay. So in order to control this new race of people, the Anak came up with a very interesting solution. Because there were lots of them, and they started to breed almost out of control. So they were what they called the Relgion, which means there were a lot of them. And later on, this word, legion, was actually used for a very militaristic race as part of these beings. So the Anak decided that the way to control these beings was to divide them. And they first divided them because once upon a time all of these beings spoke the same language. And then they rebelled against the Anak. So the leader of the Anak decided to scatter their language. And he did it in a place called Babali in this story. So some people would call it Babel. There's a large tower there. And they confounded the speech of others, so that others would then distrust people that spoke differently. And that's where we would get the word to babble from, where you speak incoherently. So they are able then to make sure that the people of this land in this story distrust each other. And they thought the way to do this is to get them to believe the same thing, but slightly different. And they said, how are we going to get these legions of people to fight amongst each other? So they decided to reinvent a legion, or to create religion. And religion then became a belief system. Now they said, how are we going to do this? Because these people have got to be able to have faith, because we're not going to be able to prove it. So they decided to make a belief and a faith-based religion. And they confounded the languages in this story so that these conflicting religions would distrust each other inherently. Now, the first religion we're going to call in this story the Jewels. And there were 12 tribes of the Jewels. And they were represented, or representative, of the 12 root races of the Anak. Now, the 12 root races of the Anak came from what was called the 12 dark men of Orion in this story. So they were each distinct. Even though they hold the same life essences, they were slightly different. And I wonder whether that would be in later form another story where you have one spacecraft and all the different races are in that spacecraft. You know, you would have a Caucasian, you would have a black person, perhaps as a communicator. You would have the driver of the ship, maybe, I don't know, maybe a Russian. You would have another navigator, possibly Chinese or Japanese. And then you would have an alien as well, you know. Well, I wonder if that's just like Star Trek. So, but that's just another story. So these 12 tribes were all from the same root race, and they scattered, and each of these 12 took on a certain group of these new beings. And they created families. So there were 12 families. And these families became enlightened or illumined. Perhaps there was a word for that. Can't think of one now. Be something like illumined people, I don't know, arty, something like that, perhaps. So these religions started to scatter, but they all came from the jewels. And it was from a person called Ebruum, which they then started to call themselves the Hebrews, perhaps, in the story. So that was how the story started. And that's where I'm going to end it right now, because this is just part 1.